Well, hello, good evening, and welcome. The first thing I want to say or sing is feelings, nothing more than feelings. I think these are the lyrics. Trying to forget those feelings of love. And then he goes into, oh, my life are feelings. I wish I'd never met you, girl. He's not very complimentary at that point in their relationship, I think. And this is the problem of feelings, I think. Good evening to you, Jacqueline Mary Brown. How are you?
Good evening, Carl. I'm a bit at sixes and sevens. I slightly feel like I've been put through a mangle, but that's because I've been having some massage treatment. And
Oh, lucky you.
I didn't know I had so many sore spots on my body.
And maybe it didn't help for me to sing to you on arrival tonight.
Well, I thought it was very well done, Carl, actually. You've got a very good voice. So
Thank you very much. Right. Well, it's an amazing evening, in certainly in Europe, I think, and I think football fans all over the world are quite excited about what's happening in Wembley, in London, as England are for the second time in my life, they're at this major level of football final. The Euro 2020 finals played, of course, in 2021. And what better sport or context in life to talk about feelings than football? So there's a nice tie in there. And it was originally your idea tonight, because we've been having quite a few conversations about the effect of feelings on us, human beings. And you came up with a rather wonderful title or talking point. If you don't like how you're feeling, change your thinking. So this might be quite useful for football fans tonight, if we go into this.
It's actually extraordinary how many feelings do come up around football. I mean, I could sort of take it or leave it, but I can also get caught up in the excitement of it. But there's a story which I think I shared with you, which I'd like to share with anybody that's watching or listening this evening, and that is quite a dear friend who actually was a taxi driver. He became a dear friend, really, because he used to pick up my family from the airport and bring them to the house and take them back to the airport when their holidays were over. And he was absolutely fanatical about football and got so emotionally involved in it all that because he had a weak heart or something like that, the doctor said to him, "You're not to watch football anymore. You will have a heart attack." Well, he did actually have a heart attack and died, but I don't know that he'd been watching football on that particular occasion, or he actually had banned it from his life. But he just was so upset every time Portugal lost anything, or he took it so personally.
Yes.
How dare they let him down personally?
Yes.
And that's a really exaggeration of what I want to talk about. But feelings do run high, don't they? And people sort of thump each other at football matches.
Oh yes.
I don't think I'd like to be a referee. A football referee. I don't think I would choose that as a career, because I think your life is in danger.
It's very interesting that. I mean, I suppose it's a bit of an aside in a way, but it's interesting how football tolerates a referee, given the level of hatred actually sometimes towards that particular person. But it's a love-hate relationship, isn't it? Because there's an understanding, I think, that it's very important that it is regulated in some way.
Yeah.
And football without a referee is actually then, I suppose, defers to the people who are actually playing, which is not a good idea. Or when parents go to football, if it's left to the parents to referee the matches and it's opposing sides, you've got to have this person in black who appears to be objective and independent, as much as you might like to dislike them. So a very interesting point there that you wouldn't like to be that person, but how important they are to be there to stop people killing each other, maybe. Well, even if they become the projection screen themselves of much anger and aggressive behaviour. But that's fascinating. Your friend and the taxi driver there, who clearly took these. I mean, what would they be scientifically? Sort of impulses, wouldn't they, in the brain?
Yeah,
They would be a translation of what he was experiencing with his senses.
exactly.
And they were so powerful that they could cause his doctor to give him a prescription of not watching football anymore. When in fact, as we know, I mean, someone said this, we've had this conversation in the last few weeks, of course, about what football is. And people who can take it or leave it are saying it's 22 millionaires chasing a bag of air. You know, that's true, isn't it? Tonight, that is exactly what it is on one level. My 2-year-old will look at people running about on a screen. He won't have any cultural or contextual references. It will mean nothing to him. So you definitely have to educate yourself into understanding what's going on such that you can put yourself through hell by having your feelings go on a 90-minute or 120-minute plus penalties roller coaster ride. And that is what we humans do to ourselves and each other.
Yeah.
Not just at football matches, but I think what you were getting at when you said, if you don't like how you're feeling, change your thinking. We do this to ourselves all day long, don't we?
Absolutely. And I think it's always been recognized as fear, but as fears that go through will affect your body hugely. And hello.
We've got a few people here. Sorry to break your flow with a few greetings, but the wonderful Mia Esmeres is here. She who teaches thousands of people beautifully how to speak European Portuguese. You'll see her on the Good Morning Portugal show from time to time. Hello, Mia, or should I say hola, boa tarde, so you can be proud of me. Boa tarde, Donna J and Senor Carl from Gary Austin. And we've been talking.
Gary, we were just talking about you earlier.
Gary's probably had some feelings to work with today.
Yes. Had to work with some feelings, I should think.
Yes, and João Mendonça as well. Amigo Carl, boa noite. Getting ready. Everyone's getting ready here. I think they maybe have tuned in to help them manage their emotions with the big match that's coming. I know Gary and João will as well. But sorry, we broke your flow there.
Well, I was just thinking about how you can get so involved in a movie and things like that. So start identifying with what's going on, and your emotions can run riot with you. And you've got women weeping over the sloppy bits, and and men turning into heroes or devils, one or the other, whichever they're watching, whoever they're siding with. Yes. So we can see those things happening. But I would like to explain an experience that I had once that really showed me how something that starts as a thought can completely take over your body and leave you in a state of fear and trembling. Yeah. And I was on my own in the house that I lived in with it had one of these sliding sort of type vinyl, I suppose, doors that they used to use quite a lot for dividing rooms up. Mm. And I was sitting there doing some sewing, actually, and this door started to waver about and sort of creep open and then creep back closed again. And in more than, probably less than about 5 minutes, I had decided there was some sort of person out behind this door just trying to get into the room to do harm to me. And I was going through all these scenarios in my head, and I got absolutely frozen with fear, but I couldn't go and look behind the door. So I had to go out of the front door and go around the house very, very quietly to look through the window to see who this monster was that was trying to get into my room and being alone in the house. And I thought, it was quite late at night and it was absolutely freezing cold outside. And there I am creeping around the house like a complete idiot, wondering what on earth I was going to find behind this door. But having decided that however awful it was, I had to know who it was. And what had actually happened was the back door had blown open, and it was just the wind. And I thought, that's just stupidity gone and thought taking over.
Absolutely.
And my whole body was trembling. And that happens to people with all sorts of imaginary things, because my mind had just taken over and was thinking everything that was about to happen to me.
Yes, indeed. And arguably you put yourself at more danger by going outside than you did by just standing up and having a look at what was behind the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the wind, just ended up to, you talked about football being a bag of wind.
Yes.
It was the same thing. It was just a bag of wind.
Yes, just a bag of wind. So the explanation between about so many human mysteries is just wind.
Yes.
Well, those who are joining us tonight may have similar stories to share, and I think people do have these episodes that they remember, don't they, where they get gripped. This is what goes on, and of course, what was great about what you just shared with us was the beauty of storytelling, and that's why humans love stories, isn't it? Because they want to know what happens next, because their emotions can be engaged with or manipulated in this way. So you say, in Dad's Army, when the old is it not Jonesy, the Scottish fellow's like, there's an old empty barn with nothing in it, and everyone's like moving in to hear this story, and we love that, don't we, as human beings? So in a way, we like it and we're entertained by it. But I think the reason for it being mentioned tonight is it actually makes our lives quite unbearable and terrible, and does us no favors on many an occasion, where the mind is just overrun with possibilities, worries, anxieties, what might be described as negative use of the imagination, and being run by our feelings. This is not an unusual way to be. And you and I have talked about this before, of course. And, I think we've even said, this is a dominant world culture, as far as we experience it anyway, where feelings are the motor of human discourse, of business, of course, as well. Business is often run on by exploiting people's feelings. Marketing people are known to exploit people's feelings, aren't they, to change their state. And of course, with the pandemic at the moment, the whole climate of fear, that is a lot about feelings and how people feel and how people's feelings are being managed or manipulated, rather than coming back to something else. And of course, that's what else we want to talk about tonight, is the something else. What else is there other than feelings running our lives each and every day or every hour? Yeah.
And our whole culture is actually not even just in selling and things like that, but it's it fills a void of emptiness. And I believe this is why soap operas and certain films, that really do stir up these emotions in us, are so popular, because when somebody's feeling something particularly strongly, it's like being alive.
Yes.
They sort of know they're alive, and it's also an addiction. It's an addiction that comes about to when we can feel sorry for ourselves, or we feel that we've been done badly by the past, or we have fears about the future, and it's all really those sort of things can be dispelled by knowing that you're actually all right in this moment. Yes. And it's almost like we've lost the ability to live in the moment.
Yes.
And to know that all is well, and that we can decide, we can actually sit and decide. I'm not talking about illness and things, but even that, to a certain extent, that we can bring it on ourselves.
Indeed.
And this is one of the things that I love about the Bible, that God says to us, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And that transformation can be learned, whether you're spiritually minded or not. You can just decide what you think. And it's almost like we've been trained to believe that we can only think that we're a victim of thoughts, and that the mind and the brain are actually separate.
Yeah.
I mean, that we probably wouldn't do very well without a brain, but you can actually decide outside what's going on in your brain. You can decide to think differently. And I've been practicing doing that and find that life is a lot sweeter.
I'm glad you got that result.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be having this conversation otherwise, would we?
No.
Like, if I've been practicing and it's been a lot worse, so I'm going to go back to my feelings. But no, I'm completely with you.
I wouldn't do. But it's just even knowing that you can change what you think.
Yeah.
You know, we're not a victim of whatever rubbish may go in and out of our minds.
Yes.
Or that whatever doesn't do us any good.
Yeah.
We can take hold of it and say, no, it's not like that. And
yes.
just think something else. But you need to focus. You need to focus on something. But first of all, you need to know that you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so many things to unpack here. Sorry, go on.
Well, this is where all the sort of positive thinking and the whole era of
personal development,
yeah, does take advantage of that. But I want to point out in a minute, because I know you've got a lot of things to say about this, Carl. But there's a lot of it's much better to fill your mind with God's truth, if you like, rather than any other truth that might be busted, you know, because you can only drum up positive thinking about, you know, I can't positively think quite in the same way maybe as someone else positively thinks. And so you've got to have something solid behind it, which is why, again, I find God's word so useful in that.
Yeah, and it either works or it doesn't, right? We, you know, if it's, and this is great that Gary says, because Gary and I have this ongoing discussion about the truth, and it's a great opportunity for me to say, if it's the truth, it'll work.
Yeah,
in the way that you suggest. Yeah, and you know, this is where the humans spend a lot of their time in conflict and difficulty in the names and the words that are used, and beyond that. A good enough definition for me is if it is the truth, it will work in exactly the way, like law, because we've had this conversation over and over again. If it's a law, it will work unerringly and reliably. Otherwise, it's not a law. And so I would use the same sort of test of truth. If it's the truth, it will set you free, as is sometimes heard.
Yes.
And that's what we're talking about, because that's the conversation tonight, isn't it? Is the other word here. Football, feelings and freedom. And a great test for all you footy fans about how well you can manage your feelings, I think, in a post or pre and post football situation, is how free you can be of them. And this is such an interesting thing to me, is that I think people are not very free of their feelings. Their feelings do run them. And, you know, Jacqueline is suggesting tonight that you can change your thinking, which will then change how you're feeling, which could be a newsflash for people. And you are speaking from your own personal experience of this, as you said before.
Well, I'm speaking of it as sometimes it's no good just sort of telling yourself you don't feel fearful when you do. So you can sort of keep on having this conversation, which is where a lot of mantras and things come from. And I'm not disputing that they work, but the word that was used biblically is transformed, which means that you don't have to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. It works on you to bring about a transformation about what you think generally.
Yeah.
And you do have to work hard at it. But if it's a lie for you, your body actually knows, and so it will at times. You may feel better for affirmations and so on and so forth, but it's not a law. Affirmation is not a law. So if you have it can change you temporarily, but if it's based on an absolute truth, which is an absolute law, then it will change you.
Yes.
And you won't fall back again.
Yeah.
When everything seems to be falling apart around you, and you have to rush off and try and convince yourself it's not happening.
With a positive. And I think anyone who's read those books and tried that and fake it till you make it knows that, don't they? There are a few comments. I mean, I'm looking forward to our unfolding conversation about this. Gary's saying it's nice to have the time to think a bit more. So I'm glad you associate us with that, Gary, and a little bit of reflection. And we welcome your comments, including this one. When I was young, my brother and I shared a bedroom together one night. I woke up in the small hours to see what I imagined to be the shape of a monk kneeling over my brother's bed. There's a chilling possibility there. It turned out to be his quilt that he kicked off the bed. It's so often the way, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as you know, Jacqueline, I took my lad, 9-year-old lad, out walking the dogs late the other night. He wanted to come with me, and he's at that age where it's really good that he does that. And he got a bit scared. So we talked about that. Thank you for that, Gary, and John Terrence, by the way. That sounds fantastic, or amusing anyway. So yeah, young Digby. I said, "Are you afraid of the dark?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, are you really afraid of the dark? Is it the dark, or is it your thoughts about the dark that you're afraid of?" And in line with what we're thinking, and I guess that's another dimension to this. There are certainly our feelings which cause us to change our behavior and bring about a physiological result in our bodies. But thinking also, I think, brings about the similar changes of state. And I think it's important to be clear that is it the dark or is it the thoughts about the dark? And it was great that a 9-year-old could see that actually what was troubling him were his thoughts, not the logical or sensory fact that it was dark. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, that there is a difference between the fact, which is, I suppose, the logic of the situation. It's not the day anymore, it's dark, the sun's on the other side of the world, it's dark out here, we're walking the dogs. What is bothering me is what I think might happen, I suspect, is what was going through his mind. And it's that brilliant thing, isn't it? The fear of the unknown. You can't be afraid of the unknown, can you? You are afraid of what you think the unknown is, or what might happen in it, because it's impossible to fear the unknown because you don't know it. I
think it's fascinating. What's happening nowadays is science is catching up with things that are written in the Bible, those laws, which are just as, when you talk about the law of gravity, it happens every time. If I pick this up, and I let go of it, I can guarantee it will keep on doing that every time I do it. It's no different.
We'd get a few more viewers if it didn't happen. I tell you, we'd be viral sensations by the end of the night if those keys had come up.
And in order to overcome gravity, you've got to have a force that lifts you up out of it. But the minute that force is taken off, which I think is sometimes how various affirmations and things like that work. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them, because they do work, but when you get a thought that creates a stronger feeling than what you're actually, the power that you're applying, then we fall out of the sky. Thought-wise. But what's happened is they've realized that many people have understood the brain to operate a bit like we see computers operating, you know, that the information in and certain things happen.
Yes.
But what actually happens, these strong reactions in our brain cut grooves, a bit like, maybe this is why those type of gramophone records, you know.
Oh, yes. Yes.
That have a groove.
Yeah.
And so what happens to us gradually is we keep seeing the same results from the same thoughts. That groove is cut in our brain, and we have to work harder.
Yeah.
So the longer we've been in that groove, it cuts it deeper and deeper. And it's a bit like water, you know, coming down from the mountain. It will cut its way through, and the channel deepens and deepens and deepens. So it's almost like a default that you've practiced so long. So the longer you've practiced it, the deeper it gets.
Yes.
And that's a lot to do with people who are constantly negative about something, or they're stuck in their past, or they're stuck in the fear of the future, whichever it is. And so that groove keeps cutting in it. It's almost like you just, you know, drop a bit of water on it, very little, but it cuts it deeper.
Yes.
So the transformation has to make new channels, and that's why it's so hard.
Yeah.
For people to get over past experiences. Yeah. Which I've noticed that modern day society, including myself, uses as a great excuse. You know, this happened to me, and so I'm stuck with it.
Well, yeah, what comes to mind is how that is a truth rather than the truth.
Yeah.
So it's etched, isn't it, like a vinyl record, in the way that needles follow a groove, or that a mountain stream follows a certain path. Unless, of course, like you say with gravity, a strong wind can blow water back up a waterfall, can't it?
Yeah.
And a small child can knock a needle out of the groove and skid it across your whole vinyl collection, much to your annoyance and upset. But generally speaking, these things do follow patterns, just like we do, which then cause a truth, as in, you know, my childhood was like this, or these people are like that, or whatever, and that becomes a truth, doesn't it, rather than the truth. And what occurs to me in the way that we in our conversations we relate, you know, the great divine Christian concepts to real life, you know, to practicality. Yes. What occurred to me was forgiveness could be the flattening of the grooves. You know, that there is nothing for the needle to. If you've been truly transformed and forgiveness has truly taken place, there's no groove for the needle to follow. There's no river path for the water to flow in. It can start afresh, can't it? You are renewed in that transformation.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of other things coming into the conversation tonight beyond feeling, but it's very difficult for us not to do that, I think. Or difficult for me.
I mean, people think you can go blank, you know, but you're thinking all the time.
Yes.
And even your brain is busy sort of sorting itself out at night time when you're asleep. So there's a lot of scientific evidence, but I think that the starting place is that knowing that we were created with free will, and free will is all about choices. And so there's wherever it takes place in us, we have a choice. We're making choices in response to thought almost every moment of every day. Yes. And our brain is trying to sort out what we did at that night time, which is why sleep is so important, because I think we'd all go completely and utterly batty.
It's true. I mean, that's how people get tortured, isn't it? Through sleep deprivation. It's a known method of torture, isn't it? It's to sleep deprive people, and they need to have that, whatever it is, the reset. What is it? Knit up the unravelled sleeve of day. That must take place, otherwise we're a mess, as we all know at times in our life. And we've got a few more comments. It's the adrenaline high, scared or happy. It can be quite potent. I think that's the identification with soap operas and football.
Yes.
And of course, one, and I'm going to gender stereotype this, but one woman's soap opera is another man's weekly football match, because men. You do wonder, don't you? A man who would go to football every Saturday and put himself through the most extraordinary and painful range of emotions must be addicted in some way to that, because it's not all good, is it? Not even if you're a Man United fan is that all good all the time. So, what is it about that causes men to be, I guess with all human experience, it's a mixed blessing. There's a company of other men. There's a religious experience of being with the crowd, but there's a hell of a lot of pain as well. It has to be said. A comment about God here. I don't know if you'd agree with this, but when God handed the brains out, he didn't spend much time around Birmingham. Oh, Gary, you can't say things like that, honestly. Apologies to anyone else listening in Birmingham this evening or from Birmingham. Another doctor, I was going to say doctor. Why am I saying Doctor Who? Doctor Who, Dad's Army. We're all doomed. I thought he was talking about the football. He's actually talking, of course, the same Scotsman in Dad's Army. But then again, we could make a religious reference there, couldn't we? But I'll do. And this again, another connection. This is I was really loving these increasing connections between what we discuss on life, death, and everything in between. Our conversations in terms. I mean, I was trying to think, what is this about, Jacqueline, since we've been doing it for a few weeks and months now? I mean, essentially, in many ways, this is about people, or you and I, talking about our relationship with God, isn't it? In so many ways, and inviting other people to do the same would be one way of looking at it. And I'm loving these analogies, connections that come up with football. And it's coming home. I mean, what does coming home mean to you, Jacqueline? I don't think it is about the European Cup coming back to England, is it?
No, it isn't coming home to me, as it is as more and more of my relationship with God and with Jesus and with his word, which is called the living word. And it is actually a life-giving word. It's not, it's the solid truth which you mentioned before, that actually sets us free. But it's not just hearing it or reading it and deciding whether you agree with it or not.
Having a feeling about it.
Or having a feeling about it. It's actually being, well, for me, it just started off by, well, I'm going to have a go at this. And quite honestly, I had a go at it a lot more about finances than anything else. And so I started to practice what I'd learned, and found that it worked. I also find that it works in people who don't know God at all, but actually put the principles into action, whether they know them or not, which is actually why I now know that is a solid truth that works every time, in the same way as I did with the dropping the keys. It's not. But the longer we sort of stand on the side and say, well, I'm not going to risk it, or I don't believe it, or it's a load of rubbish, or whatever it is, you never will find out. I mean, it's a bit like sort of saying, yuck, I don't like that soup, like you hear children say, but they haven't tried it yet. And then the next minute they're sucking it up and thinking, well, this is really nice.
Indeed. Or the lot, I never win the lottery. Why do I never win the lottery? Have you bought a ticket?
I don't win it.
I never buy a ticket.
So I don't win it every time.
Yeah. If it's your truth, then it will definitely work. Laws often get outdated and need to be changed. Once upon a time, being caught out after dark dressed as an Egyptian was heavily punishable. Is that in Birmingham, Gary? Or true? I think this is a long time ago, predating Gary's childhood in Birmingham. And my dear friend Gary there, and our ongoing subjective, objective discussion of truth and law, as you see there. Jacqueline, another Jacqueline, Jacqueline CDM is here. Hello. This is how we refer to her on Good Morning Portugal, Jacqueline CDM, a fellow Silver Coaster. Afraid of the unknown brings anxiety, for sure. And we are not our thoughts. That's a good contribution. Thank you for that, Jacqueline CDM. We are not our thoughts, aren't we? Which begs the question, which I'm going to come back to you with, Jacqueline. Not Jacqueline CDM. Well, both of you, both Jacquelines here.
Hello, Jacqueline.
If we're not our thoughts, what are we? But hold that thought. This is fascinating. Thank you, says Jacqueline, adding there. And João Mendonça, we know where his mind is tonight. Inglaterra! And it's coming home in Portuguese for us there. So that's a good consideration there. As we talk about football, feelings and freedom. I would like to talk a bit more about freedom in terms of free will and freedom to choose, and freedom under discussion at the moment because of the pandemic restrictions or measures or whatever, or freedom from the tyranny of feelings, for example. But before we go there, good point made by Jacqueline there. We are not our thoughts. I mean, would you care to comment on what we are then, Jacqueline here that I'm talking to, as well as Jacqueline CDM?
Well, we're free. We're free people who have been given free will and choices. Well, that's what free will is the ability to make a choice, which is, I know that there's tyranny in the world, and sometimes you succumb to it, but you can't actually take that away from a person. You know, even in the most dire circumstances. And then I know that you mentioned forgiveness a little while ago, and this feeling that's, you know, that what is unforgiveness? It's not accepting wrongdoing, but it's not holding against the person, and it is leaving a way open for a relationship. Because if you're actually holding somebody off or trying to, I liken it to trying to get, you know, if you go in one of those revolving doors and you try and stop it because somebody's just about to follow you into the little space as you go round. It takes a huge amount of effort, and it's quite exhausting. And it just reminded me of the Dutch lady that was in the resistance, who she and her sister were incarcerated because they got caught out and they were in a Nazi camp. And she saw her sister brutalized. And you know, I'm not saying that doesn't have any effect on you. Of course it does. But what happened was she was at a conference, a Christian conference, years and years later, and she came face to face with the guy that had so been cruel to her sister, who died, you know, from his terrorizing and abuse and so on and so forth, and who'd been converted. And he spoke to her, and she said that the feelings of rage that came up, and the wanting to smash into him or lay into him. But she had learned about forgiveness, and she asked for help, because I don't think you can always do it on your own. So she had asked God to help her. And then she said later on he came across and held out his hand to her. And she said it did take all of her prayer and desire to be obedient biblically, to forgive him.
Wow.
And she did, but it doesn't let people off the hook. It just gives them into the hands of God, who is the, who has forgiven us for so much.
Yeah.
And gone through so much pain to forgive us. So it's but we don't have to condone what they did, which is what I thought when I first started to learn about it. And I just thought, this, how can you do something? And there is a marvelous program called Rachel's Challenge, which was started by the father of the girl called Rachel, who was gunned down in one of the first big shootings that happened in schools. And the process that he went through, and the help that he's now given to people who are completely stuck, in the trying to take revenge or get revenge, and then they never get free, so they can't get on with their life at all. But it definitely is not about not letting justice be done, or not reporting rapists or child molesters or anything like that, and letting them face justice. It's not agreeing to just say, whitewash it over,
No, they need their asses kicking as well, if I may put it like that.
Absolutely, but we need not ruin our life by the fact that somebody's ruined theirs.
Indeed.
So again, it's a decision to make, but I actually feel that it needs a bit of divine help, or a lot of divine help.
Well, you said, didn't you? You said this. You can't do it on your own, because arguably, if you could do it on your own, you might have done it by now.
Yes.
As with so many things, and what I'm reminded of another sort of scenario or quip or whatever you'd call it that came up when you were talking earlier on. About feelings and thoughts. If you're in a room on your own and you're unhappy, it's interesting that you're the only person there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So who's responsible in that room? If it's just you and
Yes.
and you're unhappy, then there's an interesting dynamic there, isn't there? That could be further, or that could be a revelation. Actually, I mean, it's certainly, some people might want to think about that, but that might not set them very free. But it's a fascinating thought, and it could lead to transformation and revelation to see that, it's just me in this room and I'm miserable. Who could do something about that in this room? Me, and the help I need from outside of myself that I couldn't imagine before. Or if I had, if it was just down to me, I would have done it. But it is just me, and I need something other as well in this situation. We have some beautiful comments, Jacqueline. Jacqueline CDM, forgiveness brings freedom, even gratitude doesn't, as you're saying, doesn't mean that you have to agree with the forgiven person or agree with their acts or condone in any way the badness of their behavior. Thank you, Jacqueline, for that. Maria is here as well. Hello to you and Jan in the Netherlands tonight. Is this the person you were talking about, Jacqueline? Corrie ten Boom. And the power of forgiveness. There's a link for anybody who wishes to pursue that. And when you were telling me about that, my body was in the way that one's body chemistry, physicality follows thought, or feelings follow thought, and feelings create sensations in the body. When you were talking about her and her sister, and the man coming up to her in the conference, my body was reacting to that in the way that exactly we're talking about. It's just, in a way, it's just, for her, it was real. For me, it's just a shared human experience, which caused massive discomfort in me, just from you telling the story of the human experience, which tells you again something about how we are, isn't it? How we're wired, and how I think how the dynamics of being human work, I suppose.
Yeah. And the amazing thing is that things do get magnified as we focus on them. And, the only way we can change is to focus on something else. At the time, focus on something good, focus on something that we're grateful for. So focus on anything but that, because you become that person. You're in there. In a way, it's almost like saying this person has got a grip on you, and you're going to carry it around for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And the awful feelings for you that come up in that. And it has to be let go of otherwise, because there's nothing you can do about it in the past.
Yeah.
We can't go back and change it,
yeah.
Especially if there are people that have been close to us that have died, or we can't do anything about that. But we can make supposing it's like a child of yours that's been abused or hurt, or as in the case of Rachel's father, you're giving power over you to a monster that's already killed somebody and is killing you slowly for the rest of your life. And so it goes on. And this is why, we have these sort of tribal wars that go on for years. And we were talking earlier, I think today or yesterday, you and I, about the situation in Ireland, at one stage.
Yeah.
And it's got to stop somewhere. So it might as well stop with us.
Well, it can't stop anywhere else in a way, can it? Except in the person experiencing that, and de facto, it happens around them, doesn't it? The world, in their revelation, in their transformation, the world around them changes, and a collective of such behaviour would surely influence the world around them. And of course, we come back to free will, don't we? Because it is everyone's free will to not do that as well, and to experience the consequences of not doing it. And you can understand it as well, can't you? When someone says, "No, I can't forgive. I will take that to my grave." People are free to do that, and it's understandable, but there are consequences for that.
Well, one of our viewers, I don't know that she's here tonight, but I watched a little hours course she did on forgiveness. Well, just before that, I found myself getting so angry about something, and I didn't really know what it was. And it was obviously, again, like a challenge to go deeper. And because these grooves that I talked about are cut so deep in us, and obviously if we've been thinking these same, I won't call them negative thoughts, but thoughts that don't do us any good. If we've been thinking them for years and years and years, when you get to my age and you've been stuck in one for sort of 80 years or perhaps 70 years or whatever, it's cut so deep that you have to keep working at it. And what I realized then was something that I just I thought was completely gone, and I was set free of came back just with just a few thoughts, and I slipped right into it. And I had to consciously make the choice to think differently.
Yeah.
And
you did, right?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
But I was pretty miserable for a while. It was hours where
I'm
not
laughing.
years.
I'm not laughing at your misery. I'm laughing at the human condition, as you described so beautifully there. It's poetically humorous, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is, but especially when you can, you know better. You know that you can choose to think something different. You know, at the
Yes.
time, even if you have to do a big diversion and think about nothing to do with that person or that situation, you just need to. But an awful lot of therapy in this world has been based on digging around in the past and bringing up all your past miseries and failures, and you could just go, well, is life worth living? Just blow the brains out, which people do.
They do.
And the therapy, maybe it does help to talk about something for a while, a short while, but to get stuck in it and keep digging around in it and then exaggerating it, because it sort of gets bigger and bigger, seems to me like a really stupid waste of time. But
well, I would like to continue this conversation about that, and I'm sure we will anyway. We have other comments coming in. We are souls experiencing a human experience. That was in relation to the question, if we're not our thoughts, what are we? And thank you for that, Em, and thank you for tuning in. And I think that's what are we really is a fine topic for discussion in future weeks. So thanks for that, Em. I used to love the way the great Dave Allen would sign off after his show by thanking everyone, wishing them a good evening, and always saying them, "May your God be with you," which I always respected greatly because he was an atheist. And I'm going to be I was going to say controversial. I'm going to be a bit versial rather than controversial and say to you, there's a difference between God and your God. It's a bit like truth and your truth. I'm going to say mischievously, in only a way I may say to my brother from another mother who I love there, Gary Austin, just as a little bit of fun with Gary. And apparently, God in another context. People are singing God Save the Queen now, according to Joel Mendonça, in the Wembley Stadium. The feelings are running high, and there will be many atheists singing God Save the Queen, which is always amusing, isn't it? To Her Majesty, who's one of or two of her sons may well be at the stadium enjoying the feelings that are being aroused as we speak.
And you're definitely going off to enjoy them.
Well, I it's a real bittersweet thing. I like to think of myself as a fairly intelligent person who wouldn't have my complete body physiology ruined by images on a screen. And yet and I will tonight. I will for sure. But so parting thoughts or ideas or share from you, Jacqueline. These millions of people are going to go through this roller coaster within minutes of us ending this show, and for 90 minutes, maybe 120. And if I may say, God forbid, penalty shootout, because we don't want that. And there will be people praying, won't there? Will be people doing all sorts of things that they wouldn't normally do, having poo-pooed religion, God, Christianity. They'll be praying. They'll be using the word God lots. And they'll be doing all the things that they might not think twice about, but would criticize it in a different context. What would you say to them as they go through these feelings, or these feelings of elation or disappointment tomorrow? Because someone's got to lose tonight. And half of the people will be terribly upset about the 22 millionaires chasing a bag of air. What comfort could you give them?
Well, what I would say is, I mean, I was just about to say this. I'd like to pray that the death roll is not too high. Not too many people have heart attacks or murder their neighbours. However, whoever loses, you see, we think losing is terrible. But a man called Abraham Lincoln lost the election, I think, 32 times before he won it. So my thought on that would be, it's a step to success. There is no such thing as failure. It's just learning how to do something better.
Okay, that's for the Italians then. So that's very good. Thank you for that message for the Italian nation and players. What about the English?
I think we should take losing out of our vocabulary.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
So that is actually just changing a thought and saying it's a step to success.
Yes. Yep. Yep. So there we go. There it is.
My parting shot.
Well, and it comes right back full circle. If you don't like how you're feeling, change your thinking. And this is, I mean, people couldn't wish in their millions for better homework than what they're about, for what they're about to receive, to coin a phrase.
May the Lord make us truly thankful as the prayer goes.
What a fabulous conclusion.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, by the way, for doing the earlier start time.
So you could watch the football.
I can put myself through that tonight.
Yeah,
and we will be back. I mean, just to for people who are still here, presumably people who are not that bothered about football and who have enjoyed what we're saying tonight, is that we will be back at 8 tomorrow, next week. And I touched upon it earlier on, but this is about developing one's relationship with God, isn't it? The part of our idea of this search for a real church that we've also talked about. So people are welcome, and are welcome to reach out, aren't they, during the week as well, to you, to me as well. But I think Jacqueline would be the best recipient of such correspondence. Would you agree with me? Is that about right in terms of what our endeavour is here? Well,
our endeavour is to. Well, my endeavour is to help people find out what marvellous people they really are. You know, not to be victims.
Yes.
You know, there's no need for us to be victims of anything.
Of our feelings, of our thoughts, of other people's feelings and thoughts. And
actually to stand by for time, because you and I discussed that we might do it earlier.
Oh, of course, yes. We're going to target. Yeah, I beg your pardon. Yeah,
and especially those people in different parts of Europe, for instance, who are not on British summer time.
Yeah.
So we may do that.
No, no. That's my mistake. Let it be said. Here is the proclamation of this evening, that we will stick with this earlier start time of 7 o'clock, because I think it will be more useful, valuable, and helpful to people. Not least us, to start a bit earlier and have an earlier night. So I think 7 o'clock, 1900 hours Portuguese time is the new start time of life, death, and everything in between. And do stay with us for the conversation over the coming weeks. And please go to the Friends of Sunlight House Facebook page as well. Like that, stay in touch, send us messages there. And in due course, we will talk about our other joint endeavour, won't we, of the Sunlight Alliance as well, which we may talk about here.
Yes, we will talk about that, but also I'd like to do some short courses, which we should either do at this time, adding on to it, which starting at 7 would give more people more time. Well, in Europe anyway. I don't know where all our watchers are from, but I've had several people say that they couldn't stay on for a length of time because after our normal conversation, because it's sort of going to bedtime and getting up to go to work in the morning and things.
School night indeed. Well, here's one. So let it be known, 1900, the new start time. Love this show. Thanks both. Nice to meet you, Jacqueline, from the other Jacqueline. Nice to meet you too. I hear your name mentioned quite often on Good Morning Portugal. Well, she is very close to us here, not in a different time zone. So we look forward to meet you in person as well one day, Jacqueline, CDM. And look at this, another reminder from this man, Carl. Game on, let's be lucky. Well, good luck. May the best team win. Hopefully it'll be England. I can't help but say that. Such are the feelings that have been stirred in me, where the stiffening the sinews, summoning up the blood. Cry God for England, Harry and St. George. Come on, England. And we'll see you next week at 1900, 7 o'clock Portugal time. Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm just going to add one little thing, is that football around the world is a great uniter. And you go to somewhere in darkest Africa and the kids start to play football. And if you do play football with them, you're definitely the hero of the hour.
So
Fantastic.
there you are. It's a good thing. Enjoy the match.
Here's the football. Ciao, ciao. Boa noite. Thank you very much indeed.
Good night. Good night.
Hey.